Hey, I'm Joe, and I'm a composer and a musician.
That's why we call you the maestro. And I'm Will. I'm a literal doctor.
But don't trust this guy with your ailments.
No, I study comic books, but it still counts.
We're a couple of creative kids who host a podcast called Common Creatives.
We dig deep into filmmakers, musicians, books, and characters, really all types of artistic works and the people who make them.
We break apart the art we love to see what makes it tick.
Basically, we give you the definitive take on whatever or whoever we're discussing. All opinions are definitive and final.
So check out Common Creatives wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Eleventylife podcast.
Welcome to this week's episode of Eleventylife. I am so thankful for your presence here with us on this show. For more shows like this one, head over to rockcandyrecordings.com. We have a wonderful group of creators who put on their unicorn costumes and capes every day to make incredible content and wonderful, wonderful podcasts. So if you enjoy this show at all, head on over to rockcandyrecordings.com and find out more about our other creators. As always, huge hugs and high fives to everybody hanging out over at the Eleventylife Facebook group. You wonderful, wonderful, beautiful people. I cannot wait until we are able to tour again and play shows so I can see all of your beautiful faces and hearts in person. If you are interested in supporting what we're doing here at Rock Candy Recordings or with Eleventyseven, you can help both of us out by heading over to Spotify and checking out our brand new album, Basic Glitches. Hit that save button and let it be a part of your car ride, commute, or quarantine, whatever you are stuck in the middle of right now. We would greatly appreciate it. We got a ton of new orders from the Rock Candy Recordings online store this week, so we are filling those out and shipping them out today. Big love to everybody who is supporting us in that way as well, especially when the world is so topsy-turvy. When you support independent creators and independent art, you help to make the world a little bit better place to be in. So thank you so much for being a part of our attempt at positivity. Today's episode of Eleventylife is going to be a little bit different. So earlier this week, I was invited to be a guest on a podcast called Magnified Pod. It's a podcast hosted by these two guys, John and Andrew, and they take massively deep, extensive dives into their favorite bands. Their last two seasons have covered some of our personal favorite and formative bands, MXPX and Five Iron Frenzy. So I joined them on their podcast to talk about a band that I used to be in with some of the Five Iron Frenzy guys called The Fast Feeling. And we get into some really deep conversations, swapping stories about growing up in Protestant evangelical America, what our lives look like now, what creativity in The Fast Feeling looked like. And we also talk about some of the songs from Eleventyseven's new album, Basic Glitches. John and Andrew are some absolutely beautiful human beings, and I had a wonderful time with them. So if you get a chance, check out their podcast, Magnified Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. So this episode of Eleventylife is going to be a conversation that I had with them for their podcast, and I think you're going to love it. If you have as much fun listening as we had making it, then the world's problems are going to solve themselves any minute now. Thank you so much for being here, the artists, creators, writers, friends, family who listen to our show, who are a part of everything that we're doing here at the Rock Candy Recordings Network. You guys are the best, and without further ado, here's my conversation with Andrew and John.
John, today on Magnified Pod, we have Matt Langston. He's a musician you might know as lead singer of Eleventyseven and the Jelly Rocks, as well as writer and collaborator for The Fast Feeling. Or you may know him from his podcast, Eleventylife. His latest Eleventyseven album, Basic Glitches, is out now on Rock Candy Recordings. Matt Langston, welcome to Magnified Pod.
Yeah, you have... You know more about me than I do at this point. I had forgotten like half of those things.
Unicorn lover.
Unicorn lover.
A unicorn
enthusiast.
Lover. You are turning everything into something sexual today. It could have been like unicorn enthusiast, unicorn collector.
Unicorn appreciator. I don't know.
But you just went straight for like the unicorn.
I mean, I just realized there's probably a whole weird world of unicorn pouring out there that I don't want to see.
know more about unicorns than I care to at this point. I feel like every week somebody will volunteer some new piece of information from some bizarre place on the internet or dark web. I don't know where they come up with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing good out there. Are you a brony? Did you get into the My Little Pony thing?
I am not a brony, but I feel like it doesn't feel weird to me that there are bronies, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like I'm not that guy who can just like dive into that subculture and be super into it. But from a distance, I get why people love it. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I would love to at some point play a BronyCon. if they ever have artists. Yeah. So
sounds
I feel like there'd be some good crossover there. I think it'd work.
Yeah.
All right, so BronyCon 2021 confirmed. Thanks so much, Matt, for coming on the show. We've been talking about having you on for a while, and at this point, we've kind of blown through the entire Five Iron Frenzy discography proper and moved on to Fast Feeling last week. And we're huge fans of that record and wanted to get into that, but also just really wanted the opportunity to talk to you. You know, a lot of the stuff that you talk about on your show and over on the Rock Candy Network is a lot of the same kind of stuff that we're interested in. So we've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're going to have some fun.
So we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about our background for you and sort of how we landed on this show. We can kind of dive deeper into this later as we go on, but the kind of original idea, Andrew had this idea to start a podcast that went through the entire discography of a band that he really cared about. And for both of us, MXPX was huge as kids. And so that's kind of where we started, which is where the Magnified Pod, Magnified Plaid thing comes from.
Oh, I love
it. But as we went through, we realized, even though that band meant a ton to us, we kind of liked the idea of using the band and that kind of scene. We call it the Christian bookstore alternate universe. To talk about just the jumping off point for culture and religion and politics and the broader cultural scene of that kind of moment that we grew up in. Both of us are in pretty different places with our faith today than we were when we were young and in that scene and playing in bands and all.
You're telling me that you've backslidden.
I'm complicated. Andrew definitely backslid. I don't know what to call mine.
I'm so going to hell, Matt, like big time.
Oh man, all of us are. But there isn't one, so it's fine.
That's fine. That's totally cool.
I was raised Episcopalian and then learned about the whole sort of evangelical world through youth group, which in the 90s, I feel like all youth groups were sort of that flavor.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I learned about bands and, when I first started playing in Christian punk bands. And then I went to a Christian high school and a Christian college where we met. And so that whole time I was very entrenched in that scene, but I feel I grew up, Episcopalian, which I feel like I avoided a lot of the trauma that a lot of my friends were not able to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
By only ever being in the evangelical scene. So I don't know if I've backslid or kind of stayed. One thing we've talked about is we don't know if it's possible to really burn that hot for that long, you know what I mean? The whole acquire the fire, on fire for God. That may not be a long-term plan, and I've been a simmer my whole life. So I've been simmering all the time, never burning. But I still today identify as a Christian, but I always have looked back on that scene as sort of, looking back on it with a healthy degree of skepticism. But even though there are a lot of aspects about that culture that screwed people up and screwed us up in some ways that we get into, we also talk a lot about how it was positive for us. And it was this niche and this scene that was special and that we got to know a lot of these bands and other people. And, the world is so different now. That Christian music scene as it existed then is gone. And there is a lot to look back on that we loved and that kind of shaped us. So anyway, it's kind of a mix of talking about all that stuff on our show.
I love it. That's wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know, Andrew, if you want to weigh in to fill in any gaps there.
Yeah. Well, I'll just give my very brief context about where I am. So I grew up as a pastor's kid.
Oh Lord.
And in an evangelical church, and went to youth groups. Youth group was a very very big part of my life as a kid. And in high school, I did all sorts of stuff, Christian clubs, at our school. I did different small groups. I was like writing songs on when I first started learning guitar, I was like writing songs about my faith. And I eventually went to North Park, where John and I met, Christian school. And throughout my 20s, I became a little bit more, again, I'll use John's word, sort of, there's a skepticism that I had about the church, and especially as a lot of the ways that our denomination was treating issues of human sexuality. I became a lot more frustrated and angry with the way the church was treating the LGBTQ community. And I also, into my late 20s, I kind of stopped going to church altogether. By 29, 30, I had started questioning my faith entirely. And
I'm sorry, by 29, 30, like the year in the future, or? Okay. Right. Your age. Okay.
My age.
Oh my God. Hundreds of years from now.
I'm a time traveler.
We're like not even there in the Halo saga yet. And you're like, okay.
No, by 29, 30, you guys, things are not good.
Are there roads? Where we're going, do we need roads?
Where we're going, there are no roads, bro.
Okay.
You're a time traveler for Christ. That's wonderful.
All on fire. Everything is on fire.
I think we have the name of somebody's next album, Time Traveler for Christ.
That sounds like awful Christian fan fiction of some kind. That's like one of those books that you could like download for free on Amazon.
Oh no, it's the next book in the Left Behind series. They just haven't come out with it yet. So.
Kurt Cameron is already signed up for this movie project.
Yes, he's bringing all his bananas with him. It's going to be great.
Oh man. Okay, so anyway, the long story is I became an atheist, and I still identify as an atheist today. So for about the past 6 years, but over these past 6 years, my spiritual outlook has broadened, and I ended up going to seminary a few years ago as a way to educate myself more in areas of interfaith dialogue and kind of support the idea of people, secular humanist, atheist, non-theist beliefs should be at the table when talking about things relating to interfaith.
Yes.
So John and I have, we're both very much on a more progressive political ideology. He's more more a progressive theology. My theology as an atheist is going to be very different than like what a lot of typical like hardline atheists might
sure.
like more of an inclusivity, more of a embracing of my the people of faith who we're all just trying to figure it out, and I'm just trying to not be an asshole to anybody.
Right, you have a very wide door and a very nice spread of atheists to accommodate.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah,
that's wonderful. I love that.
So that's my deal.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of these questions, people all over the sort of theological and political spectrum talk to you on 11D Life. So do you want to maybe give sort of how would you describe what sort of your goal is on 11D Life and with Rock Candy as far as kind of having these conversations, building this community around kind of shared values or conversations you want to have?
So that's a really good question. Everybody, I don't know if your listeners are familiar, but just like a really quick 30-second history of me. I absolutely grew up in the Southern Baptist, evangelical, Protestant, kind of subculture. And then I ended up never really feeling like that was, I could never really come to terms with it, for lack of a better word. Like it just didn't quite gel with me. But at the same time, I tried my damnedest to I drank the Kool-Aid. I was the youth group kid. I loved all of the Christian bands. I was super into the Tooth and Nail discography. Anything that was on Tooth and Nail I was into. I was a big Five Iron fan, MXPX. I learned how to play guitar listening to MXPX and just kind of goofing off, But that I think at some point I began asking questions that nobody had good enough answers for. And so that, I feel like my skepticism started pretty young, and then kind of being thrust into the whole like Christian music scene, not really understanding what that was, like only ever seeing the product of that, like only ever seeing what the end of the assembly line looked like, you know, with like Christian media and books and music and all of that. I think once I got into that and kind of started seeing how the sausage was made, I was like, oh, fuck this. there's no way. Yeah. This is just like one more disappointment that I had in life, where it's like, I think that what I'm after might not be Christianity. I think that where I'm going to find peace is not going to be in whatever this religion is, because this religion is like putting me into therapy because I can't seem to do it right.
Yes.
So like having that experience within the Christian music industry, being completely burned out on it, feeling like every 5 minutes I'm having to like defend my faith, or like tell some youth pastor who's asking me like, you know, what's the Lord doing in your life today? And I'm like, I don't really know if that's a thing. I don't even know if that exists. Like youth pastors don't want to hear that. Like they want you to prop up this like evangelical agenda of like, let's get kids into here and let's clean all of them up. Let's like be a part of crafting them into something, which ends up being highly traumatic for some people who already struggle with self-image, or who have gotten all of these like crazy ideas about themselves from other people growing up. Like you get information about yourself from your parents. If your parents are always doing things for you, you get the information that you're not capable of doing anything, or that you're not good enough of doing anything. And if people are constantly like critiquing your spiritual life, then your spiritual life is never good enough. Like you're always lacking in some area.
Yes.
I think what that ended up looking like for me was that I just ended up leaving Christianity altogether, but also with an understanding that if Christianity is what I feel like it's claiming to be, or what I understand it to be claiming to be, then I'm not really sure if I'm leaving that. Because to me now, Christianity is it's a way of doing life. It's a way of approaching life. It's a way of waking up every day. It's a way of finding meaning and purpose, alleviating suffering, providing love and connection for our species. And I feel like when I start to encounter things that seem like they're tearing those facets down, I'm not sure if that's what Christianity is all about. Like, I don't think that the purpose of Christianity is at the end of the day to be right. I think it's like a really reductionist idea that somehow if you do Christianity right, you might get to see Sky Christ when you die, you know, and you end up in heaven. When I was still like a student of Christianity to a degree, because there's so many things about it that I still want to understand now that I see it in a completely different way. But it makes so much more sense to me now in the context of like Eastern religion, putting Christianity into the context of like what a lot of Eastern philosophies are. All of a sudden, like Christianity became really rich to me and full of these like really cool ideas. And all of a sudden, like the things that Christ is saying in the Bible, or is documented as saying in the Bible, they sort of start to take on this totally new meaning that I found really alleviating and really freeing. But all that to say, my beliefs about it now, I think to mainstream American Christians are amazingly heretical and wouldn't make a lot of sense. So the whole purpose, I feel like I'm getting super long-winded, but all of that's a roundabout way.
That's our brand.
Yeah. That's our wheelhouse, man.
I love it. All that's a roundabout way of saying that what I want to happen at Rock Candy is for it to be inclusive at all costs, because you can't shame people into a change of heart, and you can't shame people into having empathy for others. You're only able to witness that in others like when you're able to show it to them yourselves. And so like there's a lot of people and guests and like podcasts and stuff that we have on Rock Candy where I'm like, I'm not necessarily on board with what everybody has to say, but I don't give a shit. I'm so much more interested in making sure that we have a platform where everybody has a chance to be heard and that it's kind and inviting and nobody's being shouted down. Like we don't have any agenda, I feel like, other than just an inclusivity humility that I feel like I was never able to experience in my religious journey growing up. And so I feel like I'm just trying in a really small and maybe even insignificant way to provide that for people, to provide a safe space for everybody to be here and question. And if you're like super stoked about an idea, or you're like really zealous about an idea, whether it's like Christianity or even like Satanism, like come here, let's talk about it. Let me hear what you have to say. And so, yeah, I've found so much more joy in being able to just be happy for people on their journey wherever they are, as opposed to deciding that I'm on the right one and everybody needs to get on board with my shit. Yep. I feel like that's oppressive.
Yeah.
So
yes, thank you for all that, and I applaud you for everything that you're doing with that, because I think that's important. And kind of going back to what you were saying about how you're still a student of Christianity, even after sort of an exit from the sort of rigid adherence to the belief system. I experienced the same thing, because once I left my faith, there was less baggage and pressure to justify everything. Yes. And so I was able to read the text and look at it in a different lens, without needing to feel like I need to make sense or explain something that I don't understand. Because that's, if you come to a faith with and it's more answers than it is questions, then I think that you're doing it wrong. And yes. and I think that's what a lot of Christianity is that it is transactional. It's like, I believe in Jesus. Jesus is my savior. My savior sends me to heaven. I'm going to heaven. And that's the evangelical part, is that you need to convince other people that they're sinners and they're going to hell. And that's sort of the opposite of what I feel like the loving and embracing people is with parts of Christianity, where it's just about telling everybody they're wrong because you have the right answer and everybody else has the wrong answer. Right. And so now there is a freedom that came from a rejection of this orthodoxy that was pounded into my head, that like I needed to believe the right way of thinking. Yeah. And so now, outside of that, I can be like, I can pick up the Bible and not have this stress of everything contained within that I need to justify and instead like be able to say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Right. Yeah. The ability to say I don't know it was like one of the most freeing things. Yes. Because people would say to me, like, as a Christian, how can you explain X, Y, or Z? And to try and do the mental gymnastics to make sense of something versus just being able to say, I don't know. I'm not sure. Right. It's so weird because like even by the Protestant evangelical standards, I feel like you're still creating this idolatry of rightness. You're creating an idol of rightness in which you are constantly worshiping this idol of I have to be right. I have to be. And like they have all of these different. I mean, I grew up in that where it was like if you're not able to defend your faith, then you know. Do we need to quote James again? You know, faith without works. It just like, and I was enrolled in classes as a teenager. I took them willingly, like at my church when they would host classes, you know, trying to go through whatever new book that like Chuck Colson was hawking at the time, like trying to give Christians an ability to defend their faith. And now like looking back on all of that, I'm like, this is the biggest like load of horse shit that I think I've ever encountered, because I feel like that religion and spirituality and the pursuit of spirituality and the practice of religions are intended to elevate people. People don't need like lists of do's and don'ts or a right thing to believe or a wrong thing to believe. They need a way to like figure out how to be in touch with themselves enough to like to battle
addiction and to battle like relational things that happen in their life, to have an understanding of what their ego is and what their ego is doing, they need an avenue to marvel at the miracle of consciousness and how much we know so little about it. It's just like we're living in this amazing, massive miracle happening all around us. And for some reason, our egos want to bottleneck this whole like miracle of existence into we're existing correctly and you're not existing correctly.
Yeah.
And
Right.
somehow this is going to pay off at the end for a small percentage of us, and the rest of you guys can go fuck yourselves.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very gospelly.
Right? I mean, it just doesn't sound anything like what you would hear someone like Jesus saying in the Bible.
I don't know. I seem to remember Jesus telling a lot of people to go fuck themselves.
In the most Jewish way possible.
Yeah, he's just like the closest I think Jesus got to telling people to go fuck themselves was not your everyday people. It was, people,
It was the religious people of the day.
yeah, exactly. The people of power in the day who were, and
He called them a brood of vipers, which is basically like go fuck yourself. So
yeah, that is like the first century way of telling people to go fuck themselves.
hey, you brood of vipers.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to remember this was before anti-venom. So brood of vipers was a pretty potent
Yeah, that's true.
allegory.
It's a sick burn.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I know that over the course of 11 life, like you experienced many aspects of how Christianity plays itself out in America, in business, in the music industry. And I think it's a really cool thing that sort of the point that you're at with your career, whether you even want to call it like a calling to like use that experience to create this platform to have these kind of discussions. I think that's so valuable. And I think a lot of what folks who listen to our show love MXPX and 5-Iron and going through that stuff. But I think that the bigger thing is about like having this place to discuss the shared experience and how it screwed us up in some ways and how it was meaningful for us in other ways. So I don't know. I just think there's a lot of value in creating that space for these kind of
That is so kind of you. But I think what you guys are doing is really cool as well in that, like, who would have guessed that all of a sudden, like, these two bands, because all of my, like, everybody that I'm friends with now and that I oftentimes end up becoming friends with even in adulthood, like MXPX and 5-Iron were absolutely these like cultural touchstones. And even like within Christianity at the time, like I remember listening to some 5-Iron records and be like, what the hell is he talking about? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like this, where is he? What has he experienced? What have they experienced to cause them to be viewing the world in this different way, or kicking the tires on the theology that everyone's presented with? And I love that. And not to like,
love it.
I'm not trying to like butter their bread too much or anything, because I don't know if anybody's like super can take credit for any of this. I think a lot of it's just kind of like right place, right time. But yeah, it is kind of odd how those two bands both are still kind of homing beacons for people like us who have had that similar experience and who are like kind of like coming out of the haze or the fog and like trying to figure out what the hell's actually going on.
Yeah. One thing that Andrew and I talk about a lot is like, I think a lot of the reason why those were two of our favorite bands were they felt like they were giving us permission, I'd say especially with 5-Iron's lyrics, to question the church and to question society. And it felt like, oh, if you're questioning it from within this bubble, it makes us feel more okay about questioning it, like we're not as alone. And it's been really cool to kind of go through all that stuff again that kind of like shaped our understanding of social justice and our worldview in a lot of ways, like pouring through these records again. Because at the time it was kind of eye-opening and helped us see things that maybe we wouldn't have seen. And I know that we look back and appreciate that these are bands that were not just going with the norm, but were kind of encouraging questioning. So anyway,
I remember having this experience. I can relate this exactly. I'm gonna just like try to keep in with the 5-Iron MXPX thing.
Sure.
If that's
Appreciate
helpful.
It. That's great. Whatever you want to do.
I remember like when we first got signed and Flickr came to us and they were like, hey, we want to put you on tour with this band called Super Chick. I don't know if you guys remember that band or not.
Yes.
But that was like our first big tour. Like up until then, we had just been doing like our own shows. We were basically playing with heavy metal bands in like North Carolina and Tennessee. And so we ended up like getting this opportunity to go tour with them. And I remember like the first couple of days that we were on tour, like I met the sound guy, I met the tour manager. We were in completely over our heads. We had no idea like how to make money on tour, that we should have like bought a bunch of merch to sell. It was just like nobody explained any of that to us, like how to survive and like live on the road. Mm-hmm. And we were the only band that didn't have a tour bus to tour on. So they were doing these like humongous drives across the country at the time. And we were like doing our shows, doing all the meet and greets and stuff. And then at the end of that, tearing all of our shit down, loading up the van, and then making the drives ourselves. And it was like a wake up call. But I remember when the first show that we played with them, we all got on stage and did our sound check and everything. And then when the show started, we were the first band to come out. And when we came out, I just remembering what sound check felt like. And this felt like something totally different. Like when we got out on stage, I felt like the PA wasn't even on. And I was just like screaming into this microphone, like trying to be loud enough. And in the middle of this like song that we were playing, all of a sudden, like I start hearing Blue Mix by Five Iron. In my mind, and I was like, fuck, that's what this song is about.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if that's what it was.
Yeah.
I totally got it. I was just like, oh my God. And it somehow gave me context where like, oh, we're being bent over right now.
Yeah.
Like, and then that ended up happening. Nobody gives a shit about any of this stuff anymore. So I'm just like, I feel maybe more candid than I should be about it. But there was absolutely like, they wanted to do price matching and stuff. We were making no money on this tour. Like we were like, can we please sell our t-shirts for like $5 less than you guys are selling them? Like, this is what we normally charge. We're not trying to turn a massive profit or anything. And they're like, no, you can't compete with us. Like everybody has to sell like equal merchandise at the same price. And also we take a cut of it. And sometimes we're not the only people taking a cut of it. Sometimes the venue also takes a cut of it. It was just like mind blowing to us because at the time we thought, oh God, we're all on the same team, right? Like we have this message or this attitude of like hope and inclusivity. And aren't we really pointing people to the gospel at the end of all of this? And like, isn't that the real thing? And
capitalism, baby.
Yeah. And it's like, no, it's none of that. It's capitalism. It's business. It's like people are making money. This is not about what you thought it was about. And
it's definitely no different than just the secular music industry. Everybody's just trying to make money and take advantage of the little guy. I mean, that is unequivocally what was happening. Like some of the biggest names in Christian music were blue mixing, their contemporaries, and it's just like,
absolutely.
Fuck all the way off.
Well, and it would have been like, I would save a few of those fucks. If it were just that, if we had gone into it and people were like, look, this is the music industry, you fight and you scrap and you have to do your thing. And if you do it well enough, you succeed, and it's not for everybody. But the fact that like they had all of this religious, like goo and like toxic thinking like woven in through it, it just made it feel so icky, and it made us feel like, oh well, actually now our conscience is being violated. Like this doesn't actually feel right.
Yeah, that's such the kind of thing that lends itself to spiritual abuse and trauma, because when you're wrapping up this thing that is going to end up being negative for you and couching it in this, justifying it with this religious terminology, it's just like designed to abuse you with that kind of theology. Yeah. I mean, when you guys were first signed, what was sort of was it like a partner with us in spreading the gospel type conversation, or was it like more business focused than that, or how did they kind of present it to you?
Well, the guys that signed us were Audio Adrenaline.
Right.
So that's a complicated question, because I think that on the one hand, they were doing their best to kind of tell us what was going to happen and that this was a business. Sure. But we're also like teenagers who don't understand any of that and can't even afford like a lawyer to explain it to us. And in their defense, I feel like Audio Adrenaline's one of those bands that, like, as much as I love them, and I still love their records. And Mark and Will were nicer to us than anybody else in the entire music industry ever has been. So to their credit, like that, I'll always have that memory of them. I feel like they're also like, if there's a Kool-Aid to drink about the Christian music industry, I mean, they were like in it. You know what I mean? Sure. That was very much like their platform was like, we're spreading the gospel. Like our whole band is here to spread the gospel. And they weren't secretive about that. And maybe aren't now. I don't know. It's been so long since we've like hung out or anything. So, but I don't think that they would feel weird about me saying that.
Sure.
They definitely, I feel like we're trying to do business and religion at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just wondered about that because I feel like that conversation, you know, in the early 2000s was probably a different conversation than it is now, where like, I don't know. I mean, you can speak to this more than we know, but like I would imagine that the sort of Christian music scene as it once existed is more about promoting sort of more, you know, CCM type worship music today, and that, you know, folks who would identify as Christian bands are maybe doing their own thing more independently. I don't know. It seems today like it's less of a focus on making it big and getting a huge signing deal, because I imagine that's like less possible. But I could be wrong. Maybe that's still as much a thing now as it was then.
It's on the back of a message. It's on the back of a platform. It's not, you know, like the Christian music industry, and maybe even like the pop music industry at large, isn't necessarily something that is going to reward intellectual inquiry or artistic endeavor.
Sure.
It's there to sell a product. And when you're selling a product to Christians, you know, you whittle it down to this lowest common denominator sort of ideology that most white Protestant Christians are willing to spend money on.
Right.
And then you modify your art to reach that audience. And for anybody that like doesn't believe that, like I've experienced it. All of my friends and I have experienced this, like being in writers' rooms with people and like, hey, I have this cool idea for a song. And then all of a sudden, like Toby Mac shows up and he's like, yeah, but can we make it about Christ? It actually happened.
Oh man.
And we're just like, whatever game you're playing, like I get why you're playing it, because you have become very wealthy from this.
Right.
But you're literally talking to bands who are existing within the poverty line, and you're selling them this bill of goods. You know, it's almost like mirrors the government in some way, or in some ways, like you're telling us that that not only is this like the right move spiritually, but it's a good business move to double down on these religious beliefs,
right,
and to like reinforce this dogma.
I mean, does Toby Mac think that between tracks 3 and 5, if he doesn't talk about Jesus on track 4, that they're going to forget he's a Christian or something? Like, if this isn't a revolutionary idea, it's like, oh, Jesus in the song. I didn't think about that. That's great, Toby. Thanks for that.
I don't get the impression, at least, and I'm not a shit talker. I'm like not trying to like shit talk anybody, but in my experience, I didn't get the impression that he would delineate a line between the two. I think that for us, it felt like exploitation. Mm-hmm. And for him, it very much felt like zealousness. Like I'm holding this. And I remember like trying to have this conversation where like, yeah, but for you, your zealousness made you very wealthy. And for me, my zealousness is not in propping up an agenda. It's in questioning the agenda. Mm-hmm. And so I can't do what you're doing. I'm never going to experience that kind of success like in this platform. And our band is not going to experience that kind of success in this platform because we don't give a shit. and we can't just all of a sudden make ourselves give shits. Sorry.
You know, you couldn't, Toby Mac and Kevin Max couldn't be more different in the way they approach making art. Because like
we talk about Kevin Max all the time on the pod, but are you sort of aware of where he's at these days?
I'm not. All that I know of Kevin, like we've played a bunch of shows with him throughout the years, like a bunch of festivals and stuff. So like we would kind of run into him, but it was always in like a really weird, awkward thing where like we're both reaching for the shrimp at the same time. You know, like
classic shrimp reach.
Yeah. So it just. Yeah, I don't know enough about him to like weigh in on it, but I'm interested.
You should check out his recent albums because they're very beepy boopy.
Oh man, Oh man,
really
his
out
last
there
two,
on
his
that
last two
synthy
albums, last two albums, Romeo Drive, and he just came out with one like I don't know, maybe like a month ago, and it's weird, and it's like almost in some ways it's like a lot of it is spoken word and poetry, and it's almost like more about the poetry than it is about trying to write bangers, you know. But
he's also like a socialist now and talks about that a lot. And yeah,
right. Okay.
That dude has been on a journey. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're here for the journey.
Yeah, get him on the pod. That kind of reminded me. You know, I don't know, Andrew, if there was something that you wanted to ask along that line of questions, but like, you know, when you were talking about knowing Five Iron growing up and like appreciating them and thinking of Blue Mix and all these things, and then eventually like working with those guys, how did that kind of come to be? I mean, I know that Fast Feeling sort of had its roots originally in Pool Party Death Machine.
How do you guys know all this shit?
we come prepared. But how did that happen? Like, how did you get connected with Reese, and how did that kind of conversation start?
So Reese and I met at a festival. I think it was called Soul Fest. It was like up in New England or somewhere. Mm-hmm. Really cool festival. Sort of. Now that I'm remembering that festival, there was some shit that went down there too. But like Five Iron had broken up at the time, and I think Reese was like emceeing a stage and doing like maybe some songs and stuff with friends. Okay. Maybe. Anyway, I should speak more confidently about this, and it'd be a more interesting story. But somehow, like Reese and I ended up meeting backstage, and we like, I don't remember the conversation, like clearly between the two of us was probably one of the most awkward intros of all time. But like, I loved all of his stuff growing up, and I thought that his artistic output was cool. And I think I might have expressed that to some degree. We just kind of started talking together, realized that we were both into this band called The Faint. Yeah. And I still am like a huge fan of that band, but I would think we've always been kind of like drawn towards broody electronic kind of stuff.
Hell yeah.
And so I think we just off the cuff, we're like, hey, we should start a new wave band. We were both like on board with it, but everybody bullshits in the green room. So you never know like how serious anybody's being about it.
Right.
Then like fast forward 3 years after that conversation with them, we start emailing again, just kind of catching up, and start swapping demos. You should actually talk to Reese about this because he might have a different version of this story. But we started like emailing demos back and forth. We're like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's call it Pool Party Death Machine. And so we just started going back and forth with demos that we were creating. Then halfway through that, he was like, hey, so there's this guy, Scott. I don't know if you know about Scott or not. I was like, no. He was like, well, I really want to bring Scott on to like kind of help write some of this stuff. I feel like we'll get it done quicker if we bring him on. He's like a really great co-collaborator of mine, and it's really great. So Reese and Scott end up coming to Black Mountain, where I was living at the time in North Carolina, and like working on the record in earnest. And Scott and I like hit it off so well. I love Scott so much. Like he has such an incredible musical mind. And
he's
like,
okay.
Yeah, he's okay.
He's fine.
Yeah.
He said a very, very similar thing about you when he was on our show. So,
oh, that's so cool. Yeah, but he's amazing, and the way that he thinks about music is so different than the way I would think about it. And so I was drawn to what he was doing creatively because I'm like, oh, my brain doesn't work that way. So yeah, and we just kind of started doing that. I don't know. Did you guys talk to Reese and Scott about Pool Party already?
We talked
vaguely about it.
I think what Reese had said the first time was like, he really liked the synthy stuff that you were doing and wanted to do something along those lines. And he was on several months ago and talked about Basic Glitches, and we hadn't heard it at that point. And he was like, you have to listen to it. It rules. And he was definitely right about that. But I think he was kind of saying that's where it started, that he knew he liked your guys' sound and wanted to work with you. But we didn't really get into the weeds, right?
Yeah.
No, we didn't get into the weeds. But all I remember is that he was talking about his obsession with ELO and other bleepy bloopy kinds of stuff that he was into, and I think that's kind of where it was stemming from. And
yeah, that's true. We both have a Jeff Lynne obsession. And we're super into ELO for sure. So we ended up getting about halfway through this record, and then I'm not entirely sure what happened. Like I love Reese. I love Scott. Like it's just something just happened, and we came to a this odd creative impasse that kind of took me by surprise, and I wasn't really sure like what was going on or why we couldn't get on the same page in time or something. Yeah, without like it was so long ago that happened. Like it's hard to even remember the details of all of that, but for whatever reason, it just kind of fell apart, and I was really bummed about that because I was really proud of the stuff that we were doing. I thought it was super cool and was really looking forward to like kind of releasing it. But also at the same time, I was like, I knew that they had creative energies that I would have loved to see, like to have seen like put into another 5-iron record or some other like creative thing. And so I was also aware of that too, where it's like all of us have bands that are doing better than this startup band that we don't know how well it's going to do.
Right. So
where do our creative energies end up going? And I feel like they just kind of ended up meandering back to our own stuff. But then like, I don't know, a year after that fizzled, Scott started sending me demos that he and Leonore and Andy were working on. And I was like, dude, this is really cool. I mean, I'm always going to say that about stuff Scott sends me, but yeah, I was like,
because typically it is going to be very cool because the dude is a songwriting melody genius. That guy can just like
absolutely
crank out songs like nobody's business.
Yeah, he's amazing. And so I was like, hey, what if you tried? I essentially like heard it and I wanted it to be a little more pop accessible. Okay. I was like, what if we did this, or what if we kind of put some bleeps and bloops in it? And he really dug that idea, and one thing led to another, and I feel like we were like, yeah, let's do it. So I ended up going out to Colorado a few times to like finish up the record and track Leonore's vocals, and like vocalists are kind of weird to work with. I say that as a vocalist who's weird to work with. But like because I've had so many like awful experiences with engineers and producers in the past, I feel like I try really hard to be sensitive to that kind of stuff and to create a really fun, cool environment for people to track in. Because I didn't have that. Like I would just have emotional meltdowns in the studio when I had to do vocals. It just like brought up all of this shit for some reason, in that moment. It probably freaked all the producers out and everything. I should apologize for that. I'm going to look them up after this podcast and apologize for throwing them a curveball like that. But yeah, I just love working with vocalists and hearing like people surprise themselves with what they're able to come up with. And so I think Leonore and I just kind of like hit it off, and she's rad as hell too. Like we had so much fun together making the record. It was just like super chill.
Yeah. And, so when we talked with Leonore last week,
and she said the exact opposite.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, everybody that we've talked to has talked about how this was an extremely collaborative process.
Yes.
But that also, some of the Pool Party Death Machine songs ended up becoming Fast Feeling songs.
Oh, that's very true. That's very true.
So Until It's Gone, Sunnydale, Heartbeat, these were originally Pool Party Death Machine songs. So that stuff that you had worked on did end up seeing the light of day, just in maybe a way that you weren't completely expecting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like totally different energy and vibe. I think that they're a really cool idea. Like I'm super proud of that record. I loved that whole experience. I especially love being able to work with Scott. Like it was the first time that I had met Andy. And now Andy and I are pretty cool. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think you're just like always trying to give people their own artistic space. Like you also have to think about it in terms of like, I've only ever been in 11D and like side projects and stuff. And most of the time when I'm in side projects, I'm like creatively in charge of all of them. So like coming into the whole 5-iron dynamic was kind of like entering into like Lost at season 5 and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on with everybody. Because everybody has these like histories and their own like neuroses about each other and, their own ways of kind of coping and hanging out with each other. And so and it's like that in every band. And so I think that was fun. That was interesting to kind of see like people that had been in a band for over a decade and they just kind of had this wave that you kind of had to either catch or not.
Yeah. So you talked about how you loved working with Scott. Scott talked about how he loved working with you. I mean, it almost sounds like it almost sounds like you guys should collaborate on something again. I don't know, just throwing that out there. I'm sure, if you asked him to the prom, he'd say yes.
If he asked me, I know I would say yes. And I have the dress already picked out. No, I think like Scott and I feel like we still have this relationship where we share demos with each other, and he sent me like stuff that he's working on. I think like in a perfect world, I would love to just like hang out with Scott 24/7 and we just like make records, and then, everybody becomes rich and famous and, can provide for their families, and like it just works out that way.
Sounds like a way better timeline than we're living in right now.
Yeah, so much better. But I get, as soon as I have like a free time to connect with Scott and we start thinking about demos, all of a sudden, like I'll have a bunch of projects come in at one time that I have to mix for a band or like a producing project or something, or like an 11D release will happen. And so I think if we could ever get on the same page and it was just like the right time, that's like one of the highlights of my musical career is finding people like Scott that are so fun and talented to work with and who are just a wellspring of ideas. Because I definitely love working with people that come in with ideas.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, when Leonor was on, she kind of talked about not expecting. Well, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like maybe there are different ideas within the band about what would happen with the band, like what the long-term goals were for like, was it a record? Was it ever the idea to play shows or to go out with it? Like, so when you came in, were you just kind of going along with whatever happened, or were you hoping that might become its own thing? Or was it like, we'll just try it out and see what happens?
I feel like I was there to make art that we were proud of. That's like almost always my greatest goal when I come into a situation like that. So like I wasn't thinking about touring maybe as much. Like Leonor thrives on social activity and being in front of people and like loves it. Yeah. And I love it, but I'm drained by it. And so I think that of course, I'm more attracted to the creative output of things that like is more studio centric and more like, let's explore our thoughts, and our inner feelings and desires. And she's very much like, no, let's rock. Give me a mic. Let's do something with it. Yeah. But there's definitely a point in time where we were talking about what would a show look like, or what would like a long weekend run or something look like. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, if that idea keeps picking up steam within the group, I'm happy to ride the wave. But if it doesn't, I'm also happy to just like do this.
Sure.
So
yeah, I mean for me, I'm just curious about, one of the things everybody's kind of talked about, who got to be a part of Fast Feeling was like the sort of difficulty maybe compared to the 5-Iron experience of transferring that to a live experience. So like when you're doing 11D stuff, does that enter your brain about how that will transfer live, or because it's so synth and programming based, are you imagining that it'll be able to translate more easily than maybe folks who are playing mainly, guitars and stuff would typically do a show? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so like when we were doing 11D and everything, like there's nothing like having a couple of stacks behind you and like strumming a power chord and like feeling that lock in with the bass and like, oh my God, my butthole's rumbling. Like that's cool. I think by the time that like 11D starts kind of moving in definitely like a more electronic kind of situation, we're just making a conscious effort that we're only going to play rooms that have a PA that can do that.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's like volume, I don't think was like an issue for us. It's a totally different experience, but I think I had spent so much of my like early 20s on stage after stage after festival after festival. It's like, I know what this feels like. Like we're not going to be casting crowns. We're not going to be like the biggest Christian music thing in the world. If anything, we're going to just like set fire to all the shit, just leave it entirely, which is kind of what we did. But I was just like, it doesn't matter. I just want to make the art that I want to make. But like, having said that, when I'm writing and stuff in the studio, there are definitely times where I'm writing because I catch a vibe for what something could feel like in a live setting.
Sure.
And thinking about having an audience there while I'm programming or writing something helps inform like the writing process to some degree. Because if it's just like your own internal energy that's exciting you, like that's not always the coolest thing.
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, I think I was all psyched up on like Fast Feeling needs to play shows. Like, let's make a tour happen or something. And like, I feel like the response has kind of been like, well, it's hard to translate that stuff to a live show.
Yeah.
But I wonder if for something like 11, is it easier to transfer that sound to a show because you're so used to the setup of, programming and stuff? Like, when I think about the Fast Feeling, like I know exactly how to make that work live. Okay. That's what I wanted to hear. It's possible.
But then like all of a sudden it's like, well, then Scott and I are kind of looking at each other like, well, do you want to play guitar? Well, do you want to play bass? Or like, okay, well, so what are we? I don't know. It sounds like a dumb thing to even think about, but like,
no, I know what you mean.
Remember having those conversations where it's like, so do you want to play keys and guitar, or do you want to be relegated to bass, or do you want to like pull double duty? Or we just got way into I feel like Scott and I are definitely like details oriented people, and maybe sometimes can't see the forest for the trees.
That's interesting.
I want to talk about your earlier stuff here for a second.
Oh God.
So no, I want to say like, so your earlier records are like decidedly more pop punk than your more recent records, and the songs Cookie and Battle Cats Off Basic Glitches, at least from my interpretation, appear to be sort of middle fingers to your detractors who like disingenuously would bemoan you leaving the punk scene when you never fully felt welcome in the punk scene. And so was there a moment when you decided to embrace the beat boop sound and just said, fuck the Chads and punks?
Fuck the Chads and punks. That's actually the name of the B-Sides EP coming out.
Perfect.
Thank you for that, Andrew.
You're welcome. That one's free.
I think along with what am I trying to say? I think I'm trying to say that my musical output has in a lot of ways kind of mirrored like what my spiritual journey has been like, in that, when the younger 11 is trying so hard to just like keep up with these pop punk bands that we grew up with, and like trying to make something that we feel like is as good as that. And I feel like as we get older, as like my faith starts changing, as I start like leaving Christianity and like forming my own idea of like what the kind of person I want to be, the kind of beliefs I want to have, and how inclusive I want those to be. It also just kind of comes along with this kind of like fuck it attitude with the music that I make. And so it's like, I'm just looking for something that stimulates me in some way. Like when I'm writing a song, I love pop music. So I'm always trying to like make cool hooks or make cool sounds or make things that are danceable or fun or memorable for people to engage with and be a part of. And at the same time, that I feel like our songs have gotten progressively goofier in some ways, and then also like way maybe too intense in other ways. Like I think just over the past 3 or 4 years, I've just had so many like things happen in my life that have become catalyst for me doubling down on who I want to be and what I want to do and what I want and the kind of art that I want to put out into the world. And I kind of don't care if people like it or not, because I've come to this point where I'm so proud of what I do and what I'm doing, and proud of what I'm saying, regardless of how ridiculous or fucked up it is, that it makes me happy. And like all of a sudden have this ability within myself to make me happy. And I'm going to keep following that for all intents and purposes, I think, because I think when people see that you can be happy and that you've figured out how to be happy through creative output, that it's empowering for other people. to I don't know, to pursue, I don't know, a more enriching creative outlet, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I love how far the synth sound is pushed on both the last Eleventy and the last Jelly Rocks record. Like, I just feel like, I mean, we talk about bleeps and bloops all the time on this pod. And so when we heard the line, like, never made it in the punk rock crowd, beep boop, just a little too loud, I was like, I'm so on board for this direction. So yeah, I don't know. Is that something
I just want to say that I love so many of the lyrics on this record, but I beat boop just a little too loud. That line, I think, might be in my top 3 of the favorite lines on the record. It's just so fucking great.
Yeah. No, I 100% affirm the like hard push into like super synthy. Was there, when you were approaching, because I'm imagining like, okay, so Fast Feeling would have been like roughly around the time of Rad Science too, or maybe Rad Science comes a little bit after that.
Yeah, I think Rad Science might have been like a year and a half.
Okay.
After that, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were approaching that material, like, I mean, just, okay, so Jelly Rocks, was that sort of, you're thinking like, this will be my sort of more electro-pop focused?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
but
yeah.
So at this point, is it like, that just was enveloped into Eleventy though? Because it seems like a lot of that sound at this point is like kind of pushing in the same direction.
I think I just like quit worrying about what Eleventy is going to be and just kind of let it be its own thing. Like, in all honesty, like the Rad Science record, like I wrote the Rad Science record when I was a professor in college, like teaching audio production and music business and stuff. And there were so many like weird ass things happening with that college at the time that were like, okay, I'm going to have to make I have to make like a very public stand about what I think and what I believe and how fucked up I think that this situation is getting. People can like listen to our podcast if they want to find out more information about that. I don't want to like derail the conversation, but we literally were like calling friends of ours, because we were like, hey, maybe we'll go do some shows, maybe we'll do a tour or something, but like, we're not trying to make this the most lucrative thing in the world. Let's just have fun. Let's just like get together all of our like friends and stuff that we would want to share the stage with. And at that time, like everybody started having kids or taking jobs as worship pastors in churches. And so it just like, it became so difficult to wrangle an entire band to get together and make like a Rad Science thing happen. Mm-hmm. And so I think we just started thinking about, well, can Davey and I do this ourselves? Like, do we really need all of the other stuff? Or can I just kind of lean into the electro thing and just start thinking about how to program a set that like feels really good in front of a crowd? We don't have to have a drummer or guitar players or like, constantly just like running around and like spitting and sweating on people. Like, can we just create a totally different experience that we're really into and that we feel like other people would enjoy? Yeah, just leaned into it.
Does that mean that Jelly Rocks is sort of on hold, or that's just where your sort of solo impulses will go? That's where it'll be more reserved for?
I don't know.
Sure.
I've like been doing this long enough to know that I don't know how I'm going to feel in a month or what opportunities are going to present themselves in a month.
Yeah.
I've tried to, I don't know, there's something about the Jelly Rock stuff feels like kind of experimental to me, like a learning ground for other stuff. And so I'm trying stuff with that I wouldn't normally in other situations. But then like Basic Glitches comes out and it sounds like just a really tough Jelly Rocks record to me.
Yeah.
So there's that. Maybe there's just an inevitable like synth sound that's going to happen one way or the other.
Inevitable synths is the best direction. It's kind of like when so David Bazan started Headphones, which was like his more electronic based band, and then they broke up and I was like, no, the synths, but then his solo stuff just kind of folded in the synth sound into it. So I was like, all right, it all worked out.
No, the synths.
But the synths,
Dave!
bro.
That was one of the last like actual compact discs that I bought was that Headphones record. And then some friends of mine, because I sometimes I get distracted and like don't pay attention to stuff. I'm a huge Dave Bazan and Pedro fan. A couple years after it came out, some friends turned me on to Curse Your Branches.
Yeah.
That became like one of my favorite albums of all time. Like, in one car ride. I was like, by the time I was done listening to that record, I was like, I don't know whether to like cry or like tell everyone to fuck off, or like if I need to like go pray, but who am I praying to? Like, I don't like what, I'm so confused right now on every level of my being. And I thank Dave for that.
Totally. I feel like there's an analogy here of like Jelly Rocks is to headphones as Curse Your Branches is to Basic Glitches. Like, I feel like Basic Glitches and Curse Your Branches are sort of like siblings in a way, where it's like
I'm not deserving of that. Well, at all, but it's very kind of you to say.
I mean, like maybe not sonically necessarily, although there's some of that there. There's definitely bleeps and bloops on Curse Your Branches, but just more in terms of like that being a statement on where your faith has come and like using past production experiments to envelop it into your sort of main thing. So that kind of leads me to, I mean, how did you decide? Was deciding on sort of a theme for Basic Glitches, and I don't want to make it too trite to say like the theme of the album is sort of about leaving your faith. It might be more complicated than that, but like that is certainly a through line. Did you decide first that you were going to write a record about that, and that the sounds that you were working toward would be like a good companion for that? Or was it more just organic and thematically and sonically that's where your head was at?
I think I had left what I would call my faith, probably years before that. And I was just now like having the bandwidth to unpack all of that. So I feel like Basic Glitches is probably a more accurate like insight into how I see myself, or what I know of myself after being here on the planet for 34 years. And that like, I can be very manic and I swing very hard from like one side of the spectrum to the next, especially like mentally and emotionally. So a lot of Basic Glitches is me. I had like entered therapy about a year before I started writing that record. And a lot of the lyrics and thoughts and songs on that record come from like notes that I took in therapy sessions with a counselor. And so I would just like because I would just leave all of these counseling sessions. Like I got to the point where I was self-conscious about going to counseling sessions because I didn't know what it was. But like when I was there, I just lost it. I just started having all of these like breakdowns and becoming embarrassed that like I couldn't keep my shit together anytime that I was there. And so that was like, why am I doing this? Like, why does my body feel like it's okay to do that in this setting? Or what is it that I'm not exploring? Or what is it that's bubbling up here that I don't have words for? And so the songs are me kind of like figuring out a lot of what that was. And then I'll just get way too into the weeds with that, to like the super depressive, traumatic shit. And then I'll have to like write something like Cookie or Battle Cats, like to kind of come out of it and remind myself that like, oh, life is beautiful. Like you're able to experience so much joy now because you experienced all these different types of suffering. You can be grateful and thankful for that suffering, and you can have a good relationship with it. You just have to decide what you're going to do. Is that too much, or is that?
No, that's great.
No,
that makes total sense.
I wanted to talk about some of the lyrics, and to whatever degree you are, I know that a lot of songwriters don't like necessarily being like, can you explain what the song means, please? But like,
when you say back that ass up, what do you mean?
Yeah, that's a very nuanced lyric. Back that ass up.
It's the existential question.
Time. If the ass,
back that ass up.
If the ass backs up, then what is like? Is the ass anyway?
There you go.
Centrifugal force of the ass.
Yes. So the lyrics to "Fear the Fire" are heartbreaking, and there are things that you write that I see in my own experience, and I was curious if you could share anything about that song and kind of like when you wrote that and kind of like what that song is about a little bit.
I think I had like just so much anger at so many, like once I came to a place in my life where I was like, I literally have no reason to believe that hell exists. And by all historical accounts and my own research and even study into Christianity, like I walk away with this overwhelming feeling that like, oh my God, like we've been using this against people for millennia at this point. Like I have no idea why you would take something as like beautiful of a concept of as grace and love and unconditional acceptance and oneness with all things and with each other, and that you would throw up a gate of fear to enter into that. And that if you don't do it, if you don't adhere to these beliefs and these teachings, if you don't believe the right thing, somehow you literally burn alive for fucking eternity.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was a depressed child because I lived in chronic fear of burning alive in hell. And it was one of the things that I started addressing in all these counseling sessions. So I was like, I just have this, like, I know that that's not true now. And I don't have anything in my like grown-up brain that like feels threatened by that. If somebody was like, well, you're going to go to hell, I'm like, okay. I'm also going to meet the Pope tomorrow. But it just like, a younger part of me is still very scared of that.
Yeah.
The younger part of me still has nightmares that I wake up and everything around me is burning. And for the rest of eternity, I will just experience suffering, and not just regular suffering, but suffering in a way in which I have never known it, in which it never stops, in which I am constantly like crying out and calling out in pain and agony for all of eternity to a God that I somehow was not able to say the magic Harry Potter words to get into the right place.
Right.
So that song kind of came from that. Where it was like just this place of feeling like, no, fuck it. I'm not willing to live under this oppression anymore. And anybody else who is questioning this and wants an out, like, I'm a safe person to talk to about that. if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, for sure. And I mean, I, which is why I was saying that I resonated with this song in a lot of ways, a lot of the fear and the shame and not being able to figure out the right combination of words to keep myself from sinning and to keep myself from being able to like be a better Christian. And just sort of like the pleading with God to like tell me what to do, help me figure this out, because I just don't know why I can't stop doing the things that you're telling me I'm not supposed to do. And so like the line that it touched myself, brought about the apocalypse, this sort of like all this like sexual, immorality and jerking off that I wasn't supposed to be doing, but like I had no ways of like here are the things that you can't do, and you have no outlets, and you're raging hormones, and you can't, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do? God damn it! It's just like everything's so frustrating. But yeah, there's just like there's this combination of like this of fear and shame, and that's a terrible combination.
Yeah. It's I think that's the biggest thing is calling it what it is, which is shame. Like what we were saying at the top of the hour, like you can't shame people into a better life. Like you have to open a door and let them walk through that. Like shame is meant to control and to oppress. And it does that to people groups, and it does it to us emotionally and spiritually, the more that we like give into it. So I'm just like, all of us got these weird fucked up ideas about sexuality and what was right and what was wrong when we were growing up. And for me, I'm like, I'm done feeling shame about those things. I'm happy to talk about it. Like every teenager all over the world right now is thinking about the next time that they can jerk off.
Yeah.
So what we need.
I mean, I'm already sort of thinking about it.
Right. So it's like, why aren't we talking about like the miracle of whatever that is? Like, it's like this weird primal thing that happens within all of us that ends up generating life and affection, like for other people. Like instead of like confining it to these conversations about pornography, because then all sexuality when I was younger got associated with pornography in some way. Like my parents were not about to tell me how wonderful their sex life was. You know what I mean? Or have any sort of open or free conversation with me about the body positive things or sex positive things. So I spent a huge portion of my teenage years just feeling not only is Christianity impossible, but if I go to hell for anything, it's probably going to be for jerking off.
Oh my God.
So
if the flames were turned up 1 degree for every time I jerked off as a teenager, oh man, that would be
incinerated.
Yeah,
Again,
I'd be so screwed.
It's so weird when you think about okay, you have the gospel and what it's distilled down into in 90s American church is if you jerk off, you'll go to hell. What? It's so weird.
I think I've talked about this on the pod before, but have you seen that image of it's so the first image, it starts out with the earth, and then it zooms out and you see our solar system, and it zooms out and then you see our galaxy, and then it just keeps zooming out and you see a bigger and bigger picture, and it's and then it gets to the observable universe, and you're so insignificant and microscopic, and the last image is Jesus standing over it all saying, "Don't masturbate."
That's a perfect encapsulation.
Oh my God. Yes. No, it's exactly that. And John, exactly what you were saying, I immediately conjures these images for me of 3 crosses and Christ in the middle. And this is the fever pitch of Christianity, right, where the 2 other guys are supposed to be there. And Christ says this mind blowing shit to these people. That's to one of them who just acknowledges who he is and says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." I still have no idea what that looks like, but I look at that cross and I think about past, present, future, with Christ being the present, inviting us into that. And how huge of a metaphor that is. You could base 20 Pixar movies off of this idea of sacrifice and being present.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. And then all of a sudden, this gets condensed down to, all right, teenagers,
right.
Don't masturbate.
Right.
It just seems such a, that seems like the real heresy is to condense something as miraculous as a story like that down to sexual control.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Disaster.
It's almost the point of it was to control women and not to bring people to grace and peace.
Oh, shit. Hot take.
Burning it all down, people. Well, those were profound thoughts we were exploring, but I think it's time that we explored the couplet, "If you're bored with a Gryffindor, come cuddle with a Hufflepuff." We are huge Harry Potter fans on the show, and we both are Hufflepuffs. So I think we need to talk puffs for a second here.
Okay. Yeah. So my big deal with puffs is that none of us. I can't believe I just said that.
No, that's a brand new sentence.
Yeah. My big deal with puffs is that none of us are I was the lead singer in a band, but because out of our group, that was my thing. And I do love being in front of people to some degree, but we talked about this earlier, I'm not the guy who's all right, give me the mic. We're going to fuck shit up. I'm let's think about what we're going to say, rehearse for years, and then play one show. So the thing that I love about Gryffindors, or maybe that I'm jealous of about Gryffindors, is that I think clearly we are all morally superior and make better life decisions, but Gryffindors somehow get way more screen time than we'll ever get in any of these movies, because they're willing to be impulsive in ways that maybe we're not willing to be impulsive.
They also, they also seek glory, which is different than a Hufflepuff, which is, I feel they're okay with just letting things kind of be as they are. They're a little bit more but it's the same. Slytherin and Gryffindors are 2 sides of the same coin, that they both want They both want glory. They both want a little bit of power, and
we just want to cuddle, bro.
I just want to cuddle, and and we're also like, how about a little friendship and loyalty? You know, there's nothing that's more my speed. I don't want the glory. I just want to have a conversation with somebody.
Right. Exactly. Like all of this Harry and Ron shit that starts happening like in the 4th and 5th book. I'm like, okay, Hufflepuffs would have talked this shit out before it like came to the point, because you guys are literally fighting over something. You could each utter one sentence and clarify some things, and it would be okay. But the only thing that moves the story along is your inability to communicate. So what a thin premise to even start with. Why am I getting upset about it?
They're just like but as Hermione says, that they have the emotional depth of a teaspoon. And I think that whether or not that has something to do with the fact that they're 15-year-old boys or just their personalities of being being Gryffindors, that just sort of have egos, and you don't see any of that kind of shit from like you have the Hufflepuffs, you have Ravenclaws. You don't have Luna Lovegood running around being like getting into arguments about bullshit. She's like an intellectual. She's kind. And then you have other, Hufflepuffs that are just like, it is what it is, whatever.
Maybe not the most exciting for moving a plot along, but we would be there to talk out all the feels for sure.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to. This is something that's new to me, but I just found this today, and I wanted you to get your thought about a particular Hufflepuff fan theory, that Hufflepuffs are the stoners of Hogwarts.
I could 100% see this. So this person is arguing that Hufflepuffs are the stoners of Hogwarts because of their name, Huff and Puff, and their house ghost is a fat friar due to all the munchies. And Professor Sprout, the herbologist, is the head of house for Hufflepuff.
It's so good. It's a good theory so far.
I mean, and also their house common room is the closest to the kitchen. So, I mean, I'm not saying they're wrong, but they're definitely right.
I mean, there's something to enjoy about the Hufflepounds that you put on in the winter. So I enjoy that. I mean, the weird thing, like Luna Lovegood was Ravenclaw, correct?
She was, yes.
Yeah. So she strikes me as far more of like a chronic cannabis user than like any of the Hufflepuffs would be.
Cedric smoked up for sure. Come on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As a Hufflepuff, I love the idea of weed. I love when my friends are able to partake of that, and I love like gummies and things. But I'm actually like, I don't do super well with weed. When everybody's passing a joint around, I'm like, look, unless you want me to start questioning whether or not I can breathe, if
you stop thinking about breathing,
if I stop thinking about breathing, I'll die in front of everyone. We're all fucked. I'm writing a note right now to my mom to tell her. It's for whatever reason, it's like too much for me. Like maybe I need to find like my right strain or like the.
Bro,
these are literally all sentences Andrew has said to me.
Andrew.
Yes, I'm seriously. Yeah, there are certain strains of weed that make me paranoid as fuck, and I need to find that right, because I have had times where I'm just like, I have the right thing and I'm like super chill and it's great, but then there have been other times where I'm like, there are cameras in the walls, everybody can see what I'm doing. And it's just like that sort of
Gryffindors are listening.
The Gryffindors are listening. Yeah.
You're all Slytherins. Oh man. I bet that was more Hufflepuff talk than you expected to have in this conversation, Matt.
No, it's great. It's great.
It's the right amount.
It is exactly the right amount.
Yes, the right amount.
I wanted to ask just briefly, like, well, I'm just curious. Have you heard of this band Kite? They are like a Swedish electropop band, and nobody knows about them. I went to see them when they toured here a few years ago, and nobody was there, and it bummed me out because they rule. And I feel like 11 stuff reminds me of Kite. So anyway, I'm just putting out a Kite love into the universe. But the second part of that question is do you have, like, I don't really know much about synths in terms of how they are actually used in practical application, but I love the sound of Moog. I love Korgs. I mean, do you have a go-to favorite synth these days, like whether it's program or actual keyboard?
Yeah. So a lot of, actually most of the Basic Glitches record is a Moog Subfatty,
Okay.
a Roland SH101, and a Roland Juno 106. But like, I think I've had those synthesizers for so long and I've gotten so familiar with them. Like, to the average listener, like, nobody's going to hear a difference. But when you like play a bunch of synthesizers, especially the analog ones, it's like there's this weird thing that happens that I try to explain to people, but it never it always comes across as me being like batshit crazy. But it's like you can feel, especially on the older ones, it's almost like you are the thing completing the circuit within it. You can almost like feel a hum or a vibration in it when you touch it. And so it feels so much more like an instrument that you're playing. Like when you're strumming a guitar, you feel that like vibration within yourself because it's touching your body. And like analog synths just, I feel like, get the closest to doing that, to being like an actual person with a personality that like you would meet at a bar and be like, let's have a couple drinks. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of the software stuff, like it sounds massive and huge and it's like so fun and cool and tight and like punchy, but it just like, it also feels kind of stock.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Have you had these conversations with Ronnie Martin?
I was the biggest Joy Electric fan growing up. He actually I could attribute him, like my obsession with analog synthesizers were because he introduced me to them, like through his music, and like I would read interviews and stuff that he did, like, oh, okay, cool. So, and like you hear about all these people that are like, the people that are into Joy Electric are fucking nuts. Like I know because I'm one of them, but I would like never went down the rabbit hole. Like it always scared me to go any further down the rabbit hole than I did because people were like, yeah, but it's not. But this one synthesizer that he said was analog actually has digitally controlled oscillators instead of like just like regular floating ones, like voltage control. Like, and I was like, dude, at the end of the day, like people are either making music that you like with these things or they're not. Right. Like getting into the weird nerddom and stuff of it, I feel is just distracts you from making art. So, but maybe it's for nerds. Like maybe there's some people that just love getting into the tech stuff and not so much like the output, you know, they like the specs.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's also like another way to feel superior, and that feels gross.
Yes, that's true.
It's like, because like, yeah, you might, I mean, you're technically right, but like you and like one other person in the entire world give a shit. So
yeah, it's
congratulations,
like you're
I
right.
guess.
You're right, but you're not getting laid, and nobody cares outside of this forum that you're on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no girl has ever been like, tell me more about these oscillating, you know.
Are they digital or what?
Are they digital, like floating oscillators? Oh my God. What was that? That was the sound of my panties hitting the floor.
Oh shit. Analog panties.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I ended up buying a Juno, I think it was a 6. It was like the super old version of the Juno. And at one point, Ronnie and I were like texting back and forth. This is years ago, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago. He ended up buying this Juno 6 from me. And then the synth that he bought from me is the one that he ended up making the very last Joy Electric record with.
Oh, cool.
So, which I thought was kind of cool because I was like, this is like selling a French fry to Ronald McDonald. Like,
Totally.
Guy clearly can do without, you know, this or like my thing. It just so happened like we just kind of caught each other at the right times. I actually really want to have him on 11 Life to talk about stuff. But I'm also like, he's so. I think I'm really interested into why or how he ended up doubling down so hardcore on like theology and becoming a pastor and like what that looked like for him, because he has so many friends, that ended up in different places in life. And I don't know. He seems to have like completely gone into the whole church startup. I'm a pastor and I also am an author on the side kind of thing. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, but just make some more beep boops.
Yeah.
I'm like so much more interested in that for some reason.
It's an interesting trajectory for somebody who like carved out the weirdest corner of the like Christian market for a while.
Yes. He made being weird okay in that circle,
Right.
I feel like.
Totally.
And also he was like, in terms of that era of tooth and nail bands, and like the BEC and the Solid State, like all that era, there was nothing like him.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like that was filling a gap in the Christian industry, that there was just nobody bleeping and blooping the way Ronnie Martin was.
Dude, there's no
Robot Rock. Come on, that album rules.
Robot Rock is so mind blowing. Like
Monosynth was my fucking jam when I first heard that. The music video was fucking weird. They're like on a giant synth, and they've got like the wires, and there's like he's like they're all painted white and stuff. I'm like, what is going on,
dude? I was into it. So Ronnie Martin, I feel like, was one of those people that I can't believe I'm saying this on your podcast, but I'm a.
Is this exclusive? Is this exclusive?
Like Ronnie Martin was like looked very masculine, but had some very like effeminate qualities to himself, and the music that he made at the time like felt very effeminate. It was very like whimsical and like and I just, for whatever reason, that felt so empowering to me. Like at the time, like when I was coming up, because it's like, oh, I can literally be anything that I want. Like I don't have to fit into this like binary or this like gender norm of like, I'm a guy, so I must like drop D chords and fucking butt rock and play back and and I was just like, no, here's this guy who's like clearly incredibly talented and writes amazing music. And I'm embarrassed to listen to it around my dad because I know he thinks he would be like, "Get yourself," you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I loved it, and I feel like that even to this day, still like that was definitely like a formative thing for me. Was just his personality, his vibe, like what he was doing artistically at the time.
Yeah,
definitely made things feel more possible for me.
Yeah, and that like coming from that too, I feel like he made it. I feel like an extension of Ronnie Martin and Joy Electric is something something more contemporary, like Owl City. Adam Young being this like writing these really pretty, soaring, bleepy bloopy, very whimsical songs, just like painting these whimsical landscapes of things. And I'm just like, and he's also like not a masculine dude, and it's like, just make fucking art.
Right,
just make what you want, write about what you want. You don't need to be like he's not like he's also writing about his faith, but he's also talking about flying in airplanes and like and just all these
bugs or whatever.
yeah, right. And like I'm here for it. I'm here for just people following whatever they want to do and trying to be authentic. That's what I'm about.
Andrew, I love your vibe right now. You got so excited when you were talking about that.
Yeah, I love that.
Can I thank you for saying that. I feel affirmed. It's not often that I have my excitement and my like people who listen to the podcast can't see me, so all they hear is me yelling most of the time. So like John and I have like this balance, you know, and most of the time it's me being yelly and manic and loud.
Oh
so,
yeah. You are the Southern Belle at the Spritzer, and John is definitely like, sweetheart, let's get in the car.
It's like
You have embarrassed yourself.
I do declare. Where's my? I feel I have a fainting spell. Where's my fainting couch? I've got the vapors.
It's the Harry Potter fainting spell.
Exactly. There you go. I love seeing Andrew in a state of joy.
You guys, you're the best.
And Matt, your music brings me joy. So much joy.
Oh.
Andrew, do you have a game we can play?
I do, Matt. So you are a guest on our podcast, which means as a guest on the podcast, I like to write and make little games for our guests. Sometimes they are quizzes. Sometimes they are, in your situation, it's going to be, I'm going to give you a category and two options, and you tell me between those two options which is your favorite or the best. It's sort of a Sophie's Choice sort of situation.
Okay, so this is just like a batter's round.
Yeah, so it'll be. I'm going to give you a category and a couple options. You tell me which is your favorite or preferred in that category.
You just want knee-jerk reactions, or you want to like think about shit?
You can think about it. You can tell a story. I mean, it's going to be. It's more conversational too. So it's not just like boom, 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 boom.
Gotcha.
But this is a game I like to call Nom Nom. Matt has a whole lot of choosing.
Oh my God, Andrew! Stop it!
Oh man.
So this.
I can't believe that you did that. You're so brave.
Yeah, I have no vocal effects on me, so I did my best.
In post, we'll throw some effects on there. Yeah,
I'll get some effects on there. We'll talk about it after the show. Okay, so we talked about you growing up in youth group. Everybody knows in youth group there were lots of different youth group games. So which is the best classic youth group game? 4 on the Couch or Sardines?
I think Sardines.
Sardines?
Yeah.
Did you play 4 on the Couch?
So I think I may have, but I don't know if we called it the same thing. Just give me a quick to that.
Okay, so everybody put their name in a hat or a bowl or whatever, and then everybody else would then draw a name. And so whatever name you drew, that became your name for the game. And there was an empty chair. And so one person would call a name, and then that person would then come and sit in the empty chair. And what you wanted to do was get everybody in your team on the couch. But like everybody's names were all mixed up. So you had to remember who had what name. And then when you sat in the chair next to the person, you switched.
Oh, no.
So it was like a big memory game. And it was
complicated.
It sounds complicated, but it was very fun. It was very fun. So, but Sardines was more of an excuse to be all close up and you know in close spaces when you're all like,
we're all Hufflepuffs ready for cuddles.
That's
what
right.
Did you think I was gonna say?
That's right. It's ready for them cuddles. All right. I think I might already know the answer to this one, but best 90s Christian punk band, MXPX or Slick Shoes?
Oh, you have to choose between the two?
Yeah.
Shit. God, I love Ryan and all the Slick Shoes stuff.
New album coming out soon too.
Yeah, I'm pumped about that. I mean, I think in terms of like something being formative, I have to go with MXPX. I have to.
When did you first hear of MXPX?
Oh gosh, this is I found their album at a Sam Goody, and it was the
Goody got it, buddy. Goody got it.
Goody got it. It was the very first Let It Happen.
Yes.
It had like 32 songs on it, and it was like $7, and I was like, oh shit. I'm in this
Yeah.
to win this.
I love that album.
We've talked about Sam Goody so much on this podcast. It was like the place to go.
Yeah.
I got the Renaissance EP at Goody.
There you go.
Ooh, yeah.
You got it. So you're also a known Conan O'Brien fan.
Erotically so.
Best classic Conan O'Brien character. We're talking Late Night with Conan O'Brien, the first iteration, the masturbating bear, or Triumph, the insult comic dog.
Okay, so this is going to sound weird, but because I'm all about sexual inclusivity and not shaming, I'm going to have to go with just the absurdity of the masturbating bear. Because there were times where the insult comic dog, like, I was like, it made me uncomfortable in the best way possible. But like, I don't have enough gumption to hurt people's feelings in that way or make fun of them like that openly. So it would just,
I loved the masturbating bear because all it was just a giant bear in a diaper and just sort of jostling the. It was so absurd. I loved it so much. So good answer.
Okay.
Now I want to get a little bit more specific here. We're talking Asheville now.
Oh, wow.
Best pizza in Asheville: Fahrenheit pizza or Fahrenheit Pizza and Brewhouse or Mellow Mushroom?
Oh, neither.
Okay, tell me the best pizza, because I had the same response from Reese on something. He's like, okay, do you want the real answer about the best? Yeah. So what is the best pizza in Asheville?
So absolutely, Mellow Mushroom is great. It's also a chain.
Okay.
So Asheville is like we are super big on like shopping local and like keep it in the community and like, support people that way. The Asheville Pizza and Brewing Company makes amazing pizza. And before all the COVID stuff happened, like here, they have like a $3 movie theater. And so you can come in and watch movies and drink beer and order pizza. And it's the most magical thing when you're with your friends.
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's great. And there's another little place in West Asheville called Standard Pizza, which is just absolutely phenomenal. And for whatever reason, I want to give a shout out to them because I love them. I love their pizza. So,
movies, pizza, beer.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I miss these simple things.
Yes, those are Hufflepuff things.
It's my love language. Best barbecue. Buxton Hall Barbecue or Moe's Original?
Wow. How do you know about these? Have you ever had any of these? You just looked them up on the internet?
I've not had it. I'm also a vegan and John's vegetarian. So like none of these things are things that I'm just curious. I just want to get a look into your preferences here.
Yeah. Davey and I are both Buxton Hall fans.
Okay. And there was a fire there recently from what I read.
Yeah, that's how hot the sauce is. I'm just kidding.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm not a huge like barbecue person. Like I don't seek out barbecue for whatever reason. I'm like chicken and fish. Like if I never had a hamburger or like pork for the rest of my life, I would think I would be okay with that.
So you're a hot chicken fan?
Oh, Rocky's Hot Chicken Shack in Nashville. If you have a chance, actually, next time you guys are in town, I'll take you to Rocky's Hot Chicken Shack because you've been so wonderful to hang out with tonight. And I want to be a good host if you ever come my way.
Do they have some good sides that we could eat? Because we can't eat that chicken.
Oh, right. I should pay attention to that part. Yes. They do.
I've never been to Asheville.
They do have corn pudding. Well, no, there's some great vegetarian places we can go. And I'll pay more attention and be a better friend by the time you guys.
I'll go to the chicken place and just hang out. That sounds great.
Yeah. Just we'll watch you. We'll watch you.
That's so selfish.
Well, how about one of these places then? Best brewery: Burial Beer or Wicked Weed?
Both of them are amazing. Wicked Weed was bought out by Budweiser, so they're technically.
Oh shit!
Yeah, they're technically the man now.
Oh, damn.
But one of my wife's friends actually like helped start Wicked Weed when it was like from the ground. I will say this, there's some kind of weird like sugary sheen to all of the Wicked Weed beer that just makes it next level. Like it really is legitimately amazing beer. But having said that, like Burial has, you can't find bad beer in Asheville. It doesn't exist. Like everybody is so good. Like the best people in the world, I feel like, are here. But I also think it's because of the water. The water here is different. Like the same brewery, like Oscar Blues is here, but they're also in Colorado. Right. And so when I was out there in Colorado, I had a lot of the same beers and stuff. And I was like, it's not
interesting.
This doesn't even taste like the same.
Fascinating.
Beer. Yeah.
Dale's Pale Ale and like Oscar Blues, they're to, I guess if you want to say, to blame for the resurgence in cans. I mean, they're the cans coming back in a big way in the craft brewing scene is because of them. But also looking up Burial and Wicked Weed and looking at their cans, their can art is so cool. Like it looks so amazing. And John is a fan of the hashtag Weird Beer. And so they had a lot of interesting sours that you would be into.
Well, that's where we need to go then. Forget Rocky's Hot Chicken Shack. We'll like eat some vegetables or something and then go.
Perfect.
Grab some beers there.
Perfect.
So I think these next couple might be a little unfair, but we're going to talk some musicians from North Carolina here. Best country or bluegrass artist, Doc Watson or Earl Scruggs?
Oh my God. I don't know. Maybe Doc Watson. I so don't care. I mean,
fair enough.
I mean, like,
fuck you, Doc Watson.
I know that they're both like insanely talented. It's just not like, Spotify's jonesing to shove their new release up my butt.
Fair.
Like, right.
Okay. Well, what about jazz? Coltrane or Monk?
Ooh, I think I just like the mood of Coltrane a little bit more. I just like that vibe. Whatever the intangible, like.
Yeah, I know you're just trying to suck up to Leonore because he plays the sax. We all know that's exactly what.
No,
I did not realize that they were both from North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of that particular era of jazz. So people. I'm a huge Monk fan. I'm a hard bop, post bop, cool jazz kind of. That's kind of my jam. But I love Coltrane. I mean, Bill Evans is also like one of my all time favorites in terms of jazz pianists. But
I was getting down on some Charlie Mingus this week.
Oh yeah, Mingus is another example of like that hard bop, post bop.
Yeah.
That era of like the 50s, 60s jazz. Anyway, so yeah, sorry. I didn't know if you were a fan of like bluegrass or jazz. I was just curious because those are some pretty significant people from your neck of the woods.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We're like kind of inundated with like bluegrass and folk around here. So like you're never more than a stone's throw away from like an absolutely like shredding bluegrass band.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's some I was looking up artists that are also from North Carolina, and I didn't realize that there were, I guess I should have assumed there are a lot of big names coming out of like.
I thought that Beloved was from North Carolina.
One of my all-time favorite bands. You mentioned that you had played you back in the day you'd play with metal bands. Did you ever play with Between the Buried and Me? Because they're another.
Gosh, maybe we did. That sounds really familiar. I mean, I know who the band is, but I never thought about playing shows with them. But it's very possible that we did.
They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And NC
Not
baby
from North Carolina though, are they?
Yeah, they are.
Wow, both them and Beloved.
I thought He Is Legend was from North Carolina too.
Man.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong about all of that.
Between the Buried and Me is from Raleigh.
All right.
Here we go.
A lot of stuff
Suck
going
it, John.
on. Yeah, sorry. I've been
How dare you?
To Raleigh, Durham one time. That's my only experience in the Carolinas, so I got to change that.
Yeah.
I think I may have like passed over when I was in Eastern Tennessee. that like might have been my like one time in North Carolina, but I have no experiences there.
We're gonna change that all post-COVID. We're coming to you.
That's
right.
That's it. We got some space here. You guys are always welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Is that it for game?
That is it. That is nom nom. Matt has a whole lot of choosing.
Oh my God, I forgot how crazy.
That's, we've had some good quiz titles in our time here, but that one takes the cookie, as it were.
That's it.
Well done.
Matt, you've been extremely generous with your time. We've had a blast talking to you.
Thank you.
Everybody should subscribe to 11 Life. Everybody should go pick up 11-7's Basic Glitches. Hashtag Fast Feeling new album. That's going to get trending soon, and we're going to support that.
Hashtag cancel a bean. We're going to get that going.
Sure. Hufflepuff cuddles. Matt, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, you guys.
See you later.
11 Life is a production of Rock Candy Recordings and Rock Candy Media. Every time you subscribe to 11 Life